Hi all, my name's Ed, Global Engagement Manager here at N47. We're a $2 billion VC fund, investing in some of the most innovative companies across USA, Europe, and Israel. So, as Frank mentioned earlier on, I've spent some time, about 12, 13 years actually in the B2B SaaS space in a sales capacity, both as an individual contributor, but also as a manager. And I'm now working with N47 to help, advise our portfolio companies on the, go-to market, on sales execution, and more importantly, connecting them with people that they could find really interesting. So, the short time that I have today, I'm just going to talk through, a few areas where we've seen has been really good to sort of like invest in when it comes to building solid, relationships from an executive level, and also tying it back to everything that Matthew's saying from a data standpoint to make it, trackable and more importantly, usable from your sales team. So don't worry, it's only three slides. I won't bore you with the slides today. It'll be a quick one. So, firstly, the human side of corporate networks, right? So, no, first point, people buy from people, right? No real sort of like profound statement there. What we're looking for in our portfolio companies is our sales teams able to actually connect with their buyers. Of course, it's one thing to know about them from a demographic standpoint, firmographics, etc. But what we're looking for them to do is to become a trusted advisor to their clients, right? So are they able to actually share industry insights? Are they able to share knowledge? Are they able to connect them with the right people? Essentially, from a client point of view, they're the salespeople that they should be interacting with should be seen as someone who can actually help them grow in their career. And I'll talk through a few examples of my experience of that from the startup world. So, second point, building global relationships based on credibility and consistency. And I know, of course, there's always the temptation to chase ARR, to chase deals, to do your quarterly number. But some of the startups that we see standing out are the ones who are not only just take the trusted advisor position, but also more importantly do what's right for the customer. In this world, clients have thousands of options by typing in whatever system they're looking for into Google. And the one thing that always differentiates who they actually end up signing a deal with is the experience that they have with the sales team. So, we've got to be the ones who are doing what's right for them, for their career, for their business, for their requirements. If there's a way that we can actually help guide what those requirements look like, and even guide the sort of like experience of what they're looking for from a procurement point of view, it's amazing, of course. And also one of the things that I'm also a really big fan of is actually connecting them with people that they could find useful before we even get to the reference stage. I know it's really, really tempting to showcase your product, showcase what you can do, showcase the fact that they can even come on this journey with you as an early stage business to sort of like help them grow and build out their roadmap, etc. But if you've got an existing network of really happy people, or happy partners, happy investors, whatever it may be, connect them and let them know that you are credible to other people, and that will naturally flow from there. The other point here is small human moments create long lasting partnerships, and I've got a funny story to tell you on this one. So, I joined a business called Hi Bob many years ago. It was pre-revenue, literally only just launched, and we were, as a sales team, there was only about four or five of us at the time. And we were going through the typical motions of, outbound emails and LinkedIn and Sales Navigator, the typical way that, you'd expect to sort of like build out a sort of prospect list. And until we had the idea of simply just going to Tesco, buying a load of chocolates, buying a load of mugs, and walking around Old Street and door knocking. It sounds crazy, but that's what we did. We'd literally stand outside the building, look at the company name, search them on LinkedIn, find the HR director, knock on the door and introduce ourselves. And, we got countless HR directors and chief people officers literally posting us on LinkedIn saying what a refreshing way to, hear of a new product. And we were able to build a really strong community based on small things like that. So yeah, humble beginnings should never be despised. Managing executive relationships at scale. So once you've gone through the initial sort of like process of developing the way of drawing them in, this is where we then start to look at how we're actually dealing with them. So number one, to map your stakeholders across the business and understand the sort of like hierarchy. So whenever I go into any conversation or whenever we look at our portfolio companies to go into conversations with their clients, we want to see that they've done their research, they've done their homework on every single person that could be touching this deal. So, there will be a lot of times where if I'm going to a meeting with a potential buyer, I will ask them. I will literally name drop people that I've seen on LinkedIn in their business, to ask, oh, what's the relationship between yourself and that person? Could they be an influence to this deal? Could they be someone who could find this useful, etc. You really want to make them feel that you are clued up on their business and let them know that you've really done your homework before stepping out. Second point here is to listen deeply to their goals, pressures, and personal motivations. And if there was to be the most important point from this entire slide, it's this one, because this is the one that really sort of like creates that sticky relationship between yourself and the potential client. So an example that I have from this is that myself and a HR manager from many years ago, we actually got our system installed with the company that she was at, and 3 years later she got promoted to HR director, and in 2 years after that she got promoted to chief people officer, and that was all as a result of me and the team around me actually arming her with information from her industry, from her sector, connecting her with the right people, allowing her to speak a language that was understandable to executives in terms of return on investment for a system, how it was going to build efficiency and productivity in the company, and which really did elevate her internal personal brand. And until this day, we retain a really good relationship. And yeah, that was a really good story of how we were able to use that there. And another thing is to keep relationships warm even when we're not selling, right? So look, I've been in sales. I know that whenever you get a client to speak to you, it's not everyone that will go forward immediately, right? So I can't tell you how many times I've heard, oh, maybe next year, maybe next quarter, etc. And it's really tempting to just put a calendar invitation in a year's time when the budget's finally available, and then have a conversation with them. Super important to have that monthly or bi-monthly check in with that person. Doesn't have to necessarily be a call. It could even just be you sending an article that they could find useful. It's quite literally just to keep the touch points active with them, so that it's not weird when you do reach out to them finally asking for a conversation about when the project may be happening. And this is where I tie back into everything that Matthew has been saying, because everything I've spoken about in the previous two slides were essentially the softer side of things. This is where we start to, sort of like draw that into data, and that's when it becomes useful for the business and for management. So number one, of course, track interactions and sentiment. And this doesn't necessarily have to just end at the fact that I've had a meeting with person X. One of the things that I still do till today, and I advise any of our CROs and our founders with the rest of their teams, is to literally take notes of the conversation and write it down. If there are any key dates that are coming up for that person, any of the personal motivations that they're looking for, any of the things that could be used to actually spot a risk in a potential deal, or maybe even uncover potential opportunities, maybe for a cross sell, a partnership, or anything like that. Super important that we get that structured in a really nice way where the likes of Matthew, the likes of our sales ops team can actually pull out data and present that to management to, again, further inform what our product roadmap may look like, marketing efforts, or anything of the sort. Second is to use data to personalize your engagement. So, of course, there is an element of doing some sort of volume outreach at the beginning when it comes to sort of like getting a good list of leads for you to actually speak to and build a pipeline from there. But the minute that you do get a response, every single opportunity should be a completely personalized conversation, right? It's got to be useful, it's got to be valuable, it's got to be informative for that person. And again, if it means that from a marketing point of view, you've got a list of people that you can personalize in a certain way, it only will help the sales process, particularly if, let's just say, that budget's been pushed out to next year and you have to keep marketing to them. you then have some insights on how you can personalize your outreach or personalize some marketing to that person based on the story that they've said to you. And final point here, data plus human touch will create enduring customers. So, of course, there's the sort of like age-old debate of, is AI going to replace what we do? And look, the last time I heard, you can shake hands and have dinner with an LLM, right? From our point of view, going back to the very first point, people will always buy from people. And as long as we can actually use data to personalize those interactions, make it valuable and informative, you're well on course to creating that sort of like endurance in your customer base. So that's it for me. Open to any questions. Hope it was useful, and yeah, looking forward to answering any questions that you may have.
That was great, Ed. Thank you. Guys, feel free to add any questions in the webinar chat. In the meantime, I think, Ed, you really summed up the ethos of this entire panel really well, which is data plus human touch equals enduring customers. So I think that was a great point. Maybe a couple of questions for you. One, I really think the way that you stitched together sort of the data piece and the people piece was great, right? Data provides you very often with the what is happening, but human interactions matter. And so very often it's the people piece of it behind the scenes that tells you why those things that are happening, especially in a complex solutions-oriented sales process. I'm curious, given how important those people moments are, personalities matter, sales culture matters. How do you operationalize that? How do you advise teams in terms of building their team to sort of get that human touch as something that isn't dependent on just one or two people?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think one of the things that we're always looking for in our portfolio companies is, what sort of culture do they have from a sales point of view, right? And of course, that can be governed from the different type of products that they may be selling. But the one thing that's a non-negotiable is, how are they with just, that human conversation that they can have, right? So some of the ways that we would sort of like help to govern that, particularly when we're bringing them on board, is to provide them a template of the sort of questions that we would expect them to go and ask, right? So that they can come back, we can put that into the CRM, and then we can sort of like build out reports, build out some sort of cadences based on that, and even advise our marketing team from a sort of personalized outreach point of view. So that is one. The other area that we look at is not just to provide them the templates, but to ensure that they are able to deliver it in their own language. Everyone has their own way of delivering a message or saying something. So what we're looking to do is simply just enable people to perform at the very best, given the data needs that we have internally, to make sure that we get the best outcome.
Got it. That makes sense. And I'm also curious, you mentioned just the importance of listening deeply, which I think in some ways is exactly what Matthew's doing by collecting data, right? You're doing it in a slightly different fashion. But are there any killer questions that you find yourself always asking in order to uncover the sort of hidden objections and anxieties that your would-be customers would have?
Yeah. One of the questions that I'll ask maybe every time on a first conversation is, what keeps you up at night? These are the things that would be the main worries for my contact. These will be the things that could potentially pose a risk to them internally. This will be the areas that there's biggest upside for improvement in their own internal branding. So these are the areas that I'm always looking to focus on. There was one time I did ask that to a new father, and he actually responded, "Yeah, my baby keeps me up at night," and I had to put it back to a work conversation. But yeah, generally, things like that. What keeps you up at night? What are the strategic objectives, and how does your team contribute to that? What are the goals of the business? And essentially, if there's anything I can do to help, let's have a conversation about it. It's really, getting to understand them personally.
That sounds good. Hey, if you could, perhaps if anyone's raising their hand, feel free to let them jump in and ask their questions directly in case they don't want to put them in the chat. But in the meantime, Ed, you have been both an operator and an investor. I'm curious, what would you say that VCs look like in terms of assessing both sort of the data capabilities and that kind of human touch when they're looking at a potential investment?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're really lucky at N47 where we've got our go-to-market team which I'm part of. So some of the things that I do is actually go out with the sales team of our portfolio companies to sales engagements. It will either be some that we have generated ourselves from our network or one that they're already involved in, and we can go in and add further value. So both from a data point of view, where we can where they can share data from their own CRMs, whatever it is they may be using. We're also on the ground with them as well, so we can actually have a look at what the human touch actually looks like. If it's a breakfast, how do our CROs, how do our founders or sales team interact with with their potential ICP? And this is it's really good insights for us as well, which can also help even future investments in sharing that across our network of founders as well. So yeah, super important that we do that.
Got it. Great comments. Maybe to open it up a little bit more broadly, and Matthew, I'll bring you back in with a quick question. Ed hinted at automation, right? And we should, it's taken us a while, but the elephant in the room is we're at a pretty precarious and interesting moment technologically where a lot more is possible with new tools and with AI. There's a little bit of a double-edged sword here, right? Where as a sales operations leader, you both want to be operationally efficient and automate where possible and take advantage of some of these new technologies, but not at the cost of losing that human touch and diluting performance. I'm curious how you think about that trade-off as a sales leader right now.
Um, on our side, we are trying to automate all the low added value tasks and to focus them on the interaction, how they prep the call. And we're seeing the AI to enrich the preparation, to enrich the interaction with the prospect or the customer. And that's why we always want the sales, for example, the CRM feeling, they always has the power to bypass the automation. Or for a call preparation, we are pushing an icebreaker hook, something just to make sure they have the right info, but it's their job just to choose what they want and how they want to interact with the prospect. So we want them to focus on the human side of the discussion, and everything around we try to automate if needed. But we want to focus them on the human interaction because we think that this is where the sales team added value is.
That makes sense. I am curious also how you capture that human touch, if in any way, as you're looking at recorded calls, as you're implementing sales training and things like that to improve enablement, or how much fluidity and kind of flux do you allow in the system to find those emergent gems versus how tight and standardized do you try to be?
We have
And both of you can feel free to weigh in on that.
For example, we have a score just to see what the reaction, the emotions of the prospect. Now it's possible. The only thing it's the sense of humor. The AI is really bad at it, to be honest. But for all the other parts, we are managed to see the emotion and the impact on the prospect of the interaction, and to see the probability of closing based on this emotion, and it's quite accurate, to be honest.
Mm. Yeah, one way that we did it, one of the previous startups I was at, we used to actually gamify it where we would say anyone who had the lowest percentage of speaking in a demo for that quarter would get a prize, right? And so suddenly you started to find people being a lot more efficient with how they were speaking, how they were presenting the tool, and yeah, just simply the whole idea is to allow the customer to speak more, and then yeah, deliver more insights and get more data into the system, really. So yeah, silly way, but it worked really well.
Yeah, it's funny how sometimes when you shift the target just slightly for a sales team, they can really refocus things in a way that completely changes the way that they have those conversations.
Exactly.
Let me maybe switch things around a little bit. And I'm curious, Ed, from your perspective, and also Matthew, what data is not important today, right? If you sort of believe that as a sales leader, you are just awash with the opportunity to have way too much information. Is there any data that you've found not particularly useful or a little bit of a red herring in terms of where you spend your time and focus?
It's a tricky question, but to be honest, it's all the cross-functional data, for example, with marketing, with product. We have many discussions about data discrepancy, the fact that we are not looking at the same way the data. Is it a cohort? Is it a snapshot? And this kind of data, it's a defocus for all the team, and that's why we have to make sure we have only one data, one single source of truth, and too many data, too many departments, it's really a nightmare.
Makes sense.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think one of the things that we were sort of like in the early stages of one of the startups I was at really concerned with is, how many times has my prospect been on our website? And don't get me wrong, yes, of course, in some cases that would be really, really helpful. But you would find some salespeople start to actually include website visits in how they're forecasting a deal at times. Oh yeah, well, they've had a look at the website 20 times in the last 2 months. So I think this is something I'll be able to eventually move down the stages. It's, there comes a point where, all data can be useful, but is it relevant for that particular time and conversation and stage that you're at with that customer? So yeah, it really has to be done with some wisdom.
Makes sense. Why don't we maybe one more question, and then we'll wrap it up. If anyone has questions, again, leave them in the chat or raise your hand. You have both talked about the importance of collecting the right data, having the right relationships. I am curious, Mathieu, from your perspective, given how things have been built out at PayFit, and then Ed, from your perspective, advising different companies, where does data ownership live organizationally? At what level of the organization? Is this about centralizing the data collection and then decentralizing access, or do you see any kind of variety in terms of how companies do this successfully?
It depends the size of the company, but we saw some kind of game changer when we had a data department in charge of structuring all the data of the company. And then you have business owner in the company for the sales team, sales ops, and for other. It's really important just for us not to take care about do we have the last updated data? We are only focusing on the analyzing the data. So really important to have a data department, even one or two data scientists or analysts, but it's really important to have separate departments.
Yeah, yeah, completely agreed. Yeah, and actually, to follow on with everything that Matthew said, also, rather than having just a central point of your sort of like resource where everything data can be done, we found it really, really efficient for our portfolio companies when they had sort of like subject matter experts in each department who could manipulate data for that specific department. So from a sales point of view, marketing, operations, finance, etc. Rather than each of these departments going to one person, maybe in IT or in data, etc., who would be pulling out the relevance reports for them. If they had someone in each team that had some sort of technical capability that could do it and contextualize it for their specific department, we found it to be a really, really efficient way for them to run their sort of like data infrastructure.
I think that makes sense. I think companies often underestimate how important it is to have the folks that know how to manipulate the data actually be equipped to ask the right questions. And so having that sort of embedded approach makes a lot of sense. I see that Hege is back on, so that probably means I think we're probably about time. But thank you guys for the sessions. It's been great.
Unfortunately, running out of time. Yeah, thanks all of you, Ed, Mathieu, Frank. Super insightful. So really appreciate your time, and of course all the attendees. Thank you so much for joining.